These young white men are angry. These young white men are mad. They've been demonized. They've been pillaged for their wealth, their taxes.
The Jews have established themselves in a lot of important industries.
I'm actually not part of the Jewish right-wing media.
You know, there's the issue of Israel. There's the issue of Zionism. And there's the issue of the Jews. By the way, let's quickly talk about the word goy.
Well, Trump just won the presidency and was inaugurated, but it's not all fun and games, because now that MAGA is in office and in power, the infighting begins as to what is MAGA. There's already a major split happening between what people call the woke right and the real right. Other people are saying that there's the kosher right and then there's the nationalist right. All these fancy terms are just talking about a very simple division. There is a very pro-Israel traditional, some might call it a Zionist side of the right wing that seeks liberty. They want to support our allies. They say Israel is the greatest example of a shining light and beacon in the Middle East that protects liberties, liberalism, and we should support them. While the other side says, actually, maybe not. Maybe we should be protectionist, nativist. Maybe we should stop supporting Israel altogether. And even on the extreme sides, some say that support Israel, well, Israel should, take priority, that Israel should be our number one aim and should take all protectionary measures from our country, while the other side that goes against them basically says, maybe we should let the Arabs wipe Israel off the map. Maybe we should kick all the Jews out. I mean, look, it gets pretty diabolical and extreme when you get down to it. But to the average person watching this, you go, okay, let's talk about what MAGA is. And if we're going to talk about that conversation, we have to discuss at least one element at a time. And that's going to be like, what is the place of Zionism inside the MAGA movement? Does it have a place? Is it important? We're going to be talking about that and so much more here with my guest today, Ron Coleman. He's a legend. He is known for his incisive legal commentary and advocacy, particularly in the realms of intellectual property, free speech, and political discourse. He's an attorney at Dillon Law Group, where he has made a name for himself defending free speech rights and challenging corporate censorship. Coleman hosts the Coleman Nation podcast, where he engages with topics from law to politics with a keen, often contrarian perspective, which is why I love him. He's also an active commentator on social media, where he provides legal analysis and cultural commentary. Educated at Princeton University, Coleman brings a robust academic background to his analysis, with a career that spans from being part of Trump's legal team to representing various high-profile clients. Coleman promises an in-depth exploration of Zionism's legal, historical, and contemporary implications. It's a better background than I have, Ron. Thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Princeton, educated man.
You're welcome. And it's a better background than most people have, so don't feel bad about that. But not as good as Ben's, okay? I'll never be able to get out from under his shadow.
Mr. Shapiro?
Mr. Shapiro. These are complicated issues, and it's great that you and I are having this discussion. Even the definition of Zionism, where does Zionism fit into that? As you observed in your introduction, a lot of the stuff you see, and usually the more coarse it is, the more trolly it is. There are people who have opinions, and then there are people who may or may not even really be people who express what aren't even really opinions. It's name calling or stuff like that. I don't even know where all of it comes from, but there's the issue of Israel. There's the issue of Zionism. And there's the issue of the Jews. And one of my goals on social media has never been to be any kind of official spokesman for the Jews, much less for Zionism, especially because I'm not really, let's put it to you this way. In order to come to Boca, I didn't fly in from Jerusalem. I flew in from New Jersey. If you're a Zionist, you live in Israel.
Or Boca Raton. Honestly,
you can have a place. It can have a place. This is
like
in
Tel
Boca.
Aviv, a little bit less gay, I would say, but it's more a family-friendly Tel Aviv.
That may very well be, but certainly more gay than Jerusalem. The fact is, we have a definitional problem, and I have found myself, especially since October 7th, and especially since you officially became a Nazi.
Thank you. I haven't received my plaque yet. I'm waiting for that and my 100,000 YouTube plaque. They both never came in the mail.
Oh my gosh. That suggests to me something you should notice.
I have been noticing a lot of things, as you know, and I've made a lot of enemies, which is actually why I invited you here. Because for people that are unfamiliar, probably one of the main reasons why I want to talk to you about this is because I feel like something we were discussing in the green room was that one of the benefits of free speech being proliferated and the benefits of Rumble, and the benefits of X has been this ability to express some of your most ardent and even disgusting worldviews. I mean, people are able to just like upload porn, not to Rumble, but to X, right? They kind of fix some of it, but you used to click on a comment and then some girl's getting blown out by a BBC or something. Remember that? Do you remember that era when they had the ads and they had to restrict the OnlyFans ads where they couldn't put them under posts anymore?
You definitely could come up with some very unpleasant surprises. Yes.
So Ron Coleman's not into the BBC. So at least we found that out here. So that it was unpleasant. We talk about some other people, our side has some very, unique guests. And some people are into that. But like, my point is that with all that being said and done, we've almost forgotten or taken for granted one thing that has been interesting about big tech, with all the censorship, which I hate and I condemn, it did cause us to have to sit down, talk to people that we didn't like, and have friendly conversations with each other, because it was saying, hey, you got to censor each other. So like, well, how do we get views? So in YouTube, we used to sit down and we're like, well, let's talk to people we disagree with. That's what we used to do. We used to sit down and talk to people we disagreed with, and we would talk collegiately. We would have eloquent conversations, and we would disagree with each other respectably. And now, this is going to have to be bleeped for sure, but now people are on Rumble calling each other nicks and posting swastikas. So where's the middle, right?
Well, right. So, and there are a lot of axes that cut through that. One of the problems with this proliferation of friction-free platforms, everyone can say anything, anytime, unless your IP address is really so absolutely, on the red list, that lots of people say things they would never, ever say in real life. So it's not really people having an earnest, respectable discussion at all. You and I both know who each other are because you're Alon and I'm Ron. We know each other. We know each other's faces for many years. We've had our disagreements. We've had our agreements. But the vast majority of people who make the least responsible statements may not even be people. They may not be American. They may be ops. We don't know. And there's a lack of accountability. So you do have, to Nick, to his credit, he's a guy. He's got a face. He's got a name. He's got some really stupid ideas and a lot of really stupid followers. But Nick puts it out there. Here's who I am. Here's what I stand for. This is what I'm going to try to build my career on. And he does that. YouTube, you talk about comments, discussions that you could have. I mentioned to you before that, I was on Tim Pool a couple of weeks ago, and we're having this really respectable discussion about really complex issues. And I like to log on to the chat while I'm on a show. And it's all this stuff, nose images, little hat, and it's a joke. It's a joke. It's a freaking joke. These people are jokes. But it's funny.
Did they have the little images and
the noses?
Yeah, and the noses and the hats, and then do they have the rubbing the hands and stuff? Because I get those in my chat.
But
too.
It's ironic because I don't get a penny from the rubbing the hands guy. I posed for that years ago, and I did not get a good deal on it.
The shekels ran dry. They're buying bombs in Gaza.
You know the name of that. The name of that meme, right? That's The Merchant.
Oh,
The Merchant.
Is that like some meme? There's probably like the meme history. Or
know
whatever,
your
right?
meme.
Know your meme. Yeah.
But something else you said that also struck me. You said, we would get people we disagree with, and probably Zionism and the role of Jews in American political affairs is one of the few issues where you can actually get people who disagree to have a discussion anymore. Certainly if you're a conservative, just try and book a left-winger onto a show. I can't. Now, my show is not even a pinky. It's one joint of a pinky of your audience, okay, Coleman Nation. But I of course, people do research on you. They find out what you're about. They say, okay, so this guy's MAGA. He works with Harmy Dillon. He's a right winger, etc. I can't go on that show because you get canceled in their world for even having the discussion. Mostly because they can't have the discussion. They can't hold it up. That's a very frustrating aspect of where we are now, is that you can't really have that debate. But at least this is one issue that we can talk about, because as you were saying before, there is an historical place for Israel in American politics that has changed radically over the last 5 to 10 years. Part of that change is a result of Muslims in politics on the Democrat side. Part of that change is the realization of what has happened in the world of academia since I was in college, actually. I remember when I was, during the Cold War, when I was at Princeton. Did I mention that I went to Princeton?
Yeah. We actually got the mailer invite here, and it was like, remember to reference that as often as possible. Hey, at least we know that less than we know that Ben's wife's a doctor, right? So that's... You got that going for you.
Well, my wife is better educated than I am too.
Oh, wow. Okay. My wife's dyslexic. So
that is not a contradiction at all, though.
I just throwing out there. I love you, baby. No, but go on. What you're saying.
There's a perception issue, and that explains a lot.
Yeah.
I was collecting. So I was a big Cold Warrior.
Okay.
As one would be if you're a conservative guy in the 80s and you're in college. So you're a Reagan guy, so we were collecting signatures for a refusenik, but he wasn't Jewish. It was Andrei Sakharov, great Soviet dissident who was a critic of the Soviet weapons policy and foreign policy, and he was being treated the way the Zionist refuseniks were. But we were collecting signatures for him in the library at Princeton, in the lobby to the library, and we asked a guy comes in and we said, "Will you sign this petition for Andrei Sakharov?" And he's a foreigner. I think he was a French, and he says, "You're just trying to cover up for Sabra and Shatila, which was the massacre that took of Palestinians by Lebanese Christians during the Begin and Sharon years, in the 80s, which Israel was held responsible for because they didn't prevent the Lebanese Christians from conducting a massacre of Lebanese Muslims in a refugee camp." My point is, this idea that all Jews are Israel and everything Israel does is a relevant political consideration if a Jew is involved in the conversation, that's already been in place and becoming more and more part of the normal worldview in academia for a generation. But it has really, really bubbled to the top now. And these factors, plus the growth of Orthodox Jews in this country as a recognizable minority that is being very Jewish. We're being conspicuously Jewish. Look, Harvey Weinstein is conspicuously Jewish. There's nothing Orthodox about him, okay? But being Jewish, like Ron Coleman or Ben Shapiro.
They call that the Jewy kind of, they call it Jewy Jew, right?
Jewy Jew. Well, and
so the slang, I see that in the comments. He's a Jewy Jew.
And in fact, I believe that I may have actually coined that phrase.
I actually don't doubt that you're pretty pro. I mean, you have your reputation precedes you. I love how you have fun with it, though.
I realized it would be a useful thing for me to lean into it for a few reasons. One is that I'm smart as hell. We've gone through that already, right? And I know what I think I know how to deal with it, how to have fun with it, and you see, this is the point that I was going to get to. America's assimilated Jews are embarrassed by the Jewy Jews. They want us to stop reminding the world that Jews are not non-Jews. By the way, let's quickly talk about the word goy.
I'd love to.
Goy, I noticed the last couple of weeks, has become understood by people as an insult or a bad word. It means, first of all, you have to remember English is a blessing from God that we get to speak English. You have so many words, so many different ways of saying so many things with slightly different meanings and intonations. Hebrew is an ancient language, and words do a lot more work. Goy literally means nation or people. Among the many uses of the word goy in the Bible are to refer to the Jewish people. Goy kadosh, a holy nation. It doesn't mean scuzzy people, inferior people.
But why does Ari Shaffir, like, obviously he's a comedian, but he has a stand-up act. I think it's Shaffir, right? Where he says, he was like, the Goy statement where he's like, everybody has, it's actually pretty funny. He was like, everybody, is like, oh, we're racist, white people are racist. He's like, no, you know who's really racist? Like us Jews, because at least everyone else has, racist terms for each race. You got the Mexicans are called, one thing, the blacks are called the other. He goes, we're like point something % of the world's population, and we just lumped them all together and call them Goy. And he was like, we're like so crazy. We didn't even take time to differentiate the different people. We just said, there's us and the rest of you disgusting people. And he said, well, I don't know if this is true. I grew up in LA. I feel like I grew up with a lot of Jewish friends. I know a lot of Jewish people today. I think a lot of them are probably like shocked that I didn't support, Israel, after October 7th. I think that hurt. I lost friends that felt hurt, right? Which is one thing, because it grew up with me. A lot of friends thought I was Jewish too. People still think I'm Jewish. That's a really common thing.
Because you have one of those names that could go either way.
Elijah Schaffer is a pretty Jewy name.
And you don't have the C, or you do have the C.
No, I do have the C.
So that usually is a tip off.
Yeah, I do have the C, but I don't have the E. We did drop the E, so we have the double F, which is like the ambulance company.
The umlaut A.
Correct. So we don't have the umlaut A, but I will say, all that aside, I feel like when people used Goy to me, like I feel like it was derogatory or comedic. I feel like there's always a little bit of derogatory, because I say I'm a comedian, but I mean most of what I say. When I say it's a joke, it is a joke, but I mean it.
Well, so and that's a good joke by him. The fact of the matter is that the worldview of Jewish people, English-speaking Jewish people, frequently, especially people who are only 1 or 2 generations off the boat, like me, is to differing extents, and it gets less so as time goes on, we're translating from Yiddish. So in other words, the world experience of Eastern European Jews, most of whom, there was a generation that preceded World War II, and then the doors were closed, and then there were survivors who came after World War II. That generation of people lived in a world where, as he says it, you were either a Jew or a Goy. No matter what country you lived in, if you were a Jew, you had fewer civil rights, or worse. And if it didn't matter whether you were, people don't realize how fascist Poland was before World War II. It was, it was very repressive towards Jews. There were countries where in the last 50 years before World War II, it was easier for Jews to assimilate and have, some degree of civil rights. But the experience had been, if you're a Jew, you're at best a second-class citizen, which meant that what do you do when you're treated like a second-class citizen? You turn it around. Black pride. I mean, do you remember when it became a thing to actually, when we started hearing about the way white people are described? Because like when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, white people were the default people, because that was America in the 60s and 70s. And I didn't even begin to understand that there was actual animosity toward white people on the part of black people. And I don't mean toward bigots or toward segregationists, but toward people for being white, until the last maybe 20 or 30 years. There's a reaction that sets in when you're a minority where everyone's an outsider. You're an inside. It's an insider versus an outsider. But there's all at the same time. There's also an inferior. When we make a bris, which is another favorite topic in the comments, right?
It's circumcision,
right? So when the bris ceremony, the baby is brought in by someone, by a family member or a person who is given the honor. The uncircumcised baby is brought in on a pillow to begin the ceremony. And when the baby walks in, everybody stands up in honor of the person who's about to do a mitzvah. But the old Jewish joke is, why does everyone stand out when the baby when they bring in the baby? Because a guy just walked into the room. In other words, he's not Jewish yet. He's having his bris.
But see, that's some crazy. That's what I was saying. It's funny, but it's also like there is a little bit of a
no. There is. In other words, there's an
come on. They do have a little bit of like. There is a little bit of animosity towards the goy in certain.
Oh, listen,
I've felt it before. I feel it every day. Are you
kidding? Listen, you feel it like right now.
Yeah, I feel like I need to leave. Actually, I need somebody give me some matzah. I got to get out of here.
Matzah.
I got to go for
that is the least kind thing you could ask for. One thing that I think is good, and you and I think are both cool with, and I think we need more of, is more people making more jokes.
Hell yeah. When you stop laughing, you lose,
It is, right. The whole idea, and that's why, again, part of the leaning into the, being one of the really Jewish guys on the, in the writer-sphere. Play into it, lean into it, have fun with it, because at the end of the day, when we sit down, when it's time to decide what really has to be done, we identify the problems in society the same way. And in fact, so one of the dilemmas that sounded like a non-segue, but it was actually a segue. In fact, one of the dilemmas for Orthodox Jews is that we're really conservative. We're freaking crazy conservative. Our women don't give speeches. I mean, we don't put them in burqas, but like in my
they wear wigs, right? I mean,
they wear wigs. In Israel, they actually don't wear wigs as much, but in America, my wife wears a wig. In our newspapers, and particularly in the sort of subculture where my family and I exist, women's pictures are not printed in the newspaper, which is hilarious because they once were doing some news report on like one of those international summits, and Hillary Clinton was in the picture. And she was Secretary of State, and they had to like fuzz her out, because we have a bright line rule that since we don't know who is going to be a thirst trap, like we don't make a subjective.
Look, I'm going to say this: whoever was running that was mentally incapacitated. Because if you see Hillary Clinton and you think a man's going to lust after that,
no, but that's the point.
I mean, maybe a woman.
No, the point is it's like a bright line. No, but it's a bright line rule.
Right, just putting something in the
sand. Because otherwise you're
there.
going to insult someone by saying, "Oh, we could print your picture. You're 50 years old. You're an old."
Yeah, I don't think it's like if somebody's getting an erection from Hillary Clinton, we have a bigger problem than even what's going on in Gaza right now. Like this is a bigger issue. But not to cut you off, but in terms of the bright lining stuff, this is kind of what I want to know of the differences. Is like, I think it's funny to me. I mean this genuinely. When you're like, I'm one of the Jews in right wing politics. It's like true, but also. That means you've got to be pretty Jewish, because to me, like saying Jewish and right-wing politics are almost synonymous. However, I would say that's becoming increasingly less so. Currently, there's becoming a greater division right now where people are trying to differentiate themselves, saying, I'm actually not part of the Jewish right-wing media. And then I would say the Jewish right-wing media. Now, I want to segue to this, but I got to tell you guys something important here as we go into this. Obviously, things are not good overseas, right? You currently have a war and a conflict going on in Ukraine. This conversation, besides just like the interesting side of the division between Jews and America, there's a lot we touched on. Feeling like minorities, the kind of hatred that comes, between the two groups. But I think there's a reversal that's going on, and I want to set the stage here for you, because what I think I see happening here. Let's take Jews out of the equation. Let's take other minorities in the United States, like Black Americans. The age of white guilt, I think, is coming to a close.
Thank God.
With the age of the ending of wokeness. But there is a side that I'm not sure you like, but I'm not going to put words into your mouth, where a lot of white people are becoming, especially young Gen Z men, are becoming like, you know what? Not only do I not have white guilt, but how about you POSs that have concocted and try to make us feel this way? How about we don't not only just go back to tolerating you, how about we do a whiplash? How about we go to the point where you should feel bad that you're in this country? And in fact, we actually don't like you guys. You commit to our crime. You commit, you like they say it's 1350, but we know the statistics are much higher. We know YouTube doesn't like those statistics. They don't really like the truth very much. But we know in cities like Detroit, it's up to 80% is by 13 to 14%. And I think it was it Vermont? I think it was Vermont, right? That 1%, 1.4% was like 30%. That's the craziest stat I've ever seen of homicides. That's crazy. Okay. And so people are becoming increasingly racist, and Instagram has actually turned into like the racism app. It's just crazy. And it's tolerated because people are angry and they realize there's got to be a steam valve, and they're letting people just voice their anger. But I'm seeing that now go to a lot of different, this sort of rejection of white guilt. This is what I'm thinking intellectually it is. You can correct me later. Is that it's a reaction, and it's like, okay, let's get in. Now, as this reaction's coming, you get a lot of these, white nationalist groups, these national socialist, pro-white groups, and they're going, look, these young white men are angry. These young white men are mad. They've been demonized. They've been pillaged for their wealth, their taxes, their resources meant to pay for things.
And their opportunities.
Correct. And we can get them strong to where we can tell them, what if these people were in your country? And quite frankly, as you know, no matter how deep you get into the algorithm, eventually, even if you start with being angry at blacks or this or that, it comes down to one focal point. Who's really behind all of this?
The Jews.
Yeah,
Jews.
it's Ron Coleman.
The Bears.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Or as people call them, the Jews, J-O-O-S. So like, I just setting the stage there. Do you agree that that's kind of what's happening right now? Because that's what I see happening.
I think that there is an element on the internet that wants that to happen, because preventing the Jews and the non-Jews, the white non-Jews in America from working together is really bad for both groups, because the Jews are talented. The Jews have established themselves in a lot of important industries. And the white people in this country, the non-Jewish white people, and we're white, but we need allies. And what has become very clear is that the majority of non-white American are not our allies. There's a lot of resentment. So where does the resentment come from? There is again,
but come on, white people or Jews? Are saying they're the same thing?
There's resentment among white people and non-white people towards Jews.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yes. There are, to some extent, we don't have enough time today to talk about why is there anti-Semitism? Why is it a feature? The reach in the comments who will talk about people getting kicked out of 161 countries. That's a scam. It wasn't 161 countries. It's like 161 counties. And most of them are like some king made a promise to the Pope that if everybody, in 1347, that we're going to either baptize everyone or cut their heads off or throw them out of the country. Like that's nonsense. What we do have, though, is that Jews occupy a statistically disproportionate amount of key positions in American life. Disproportionate, not because right and wrong, good, like they ought not, it's more than they ought to have. It's more than you would predict based on just chance. Why is that? Because Jews are highly literate. Jews have historically, not so much today as historically, except among in the Orthodox world, had very strong families. Because remember, a very large percentage of today's American Jews are descended from people who came to this country in the last century. So they have traditional values. There's resentment when someone's doing better than you are. And to a large extent, there's another problem. And that is that many Jews in this country have not done the Jewish people any favors with the moral effect they have had on American culture. Hollywood is not run by the Jews, but there are a hell of a lot of Jews in Hollywood who are very influential. And indeed, the industry was essentially created by Jews. And guess what? It has corroded American morality over the last century to a tremendous extent. And we can see many examples of where Jews who were either rejected or were raised by parents who rejected their moral and religious traditions attached themselves to ideologies that are unhealthy. So when you look at some of the worst characters in American public life today, Adam Schiff.
He does look like a goblin. Can we admit that, though? Like, by the way,
I don't know whatever the hell else is going on.
He looks like one of the banker goblins from Harry Potter. Like he looks evil. Do you know what I mean? He's like, "Rrr." Like he looks like a demon.
Compared to what, Gerald Nadler?
Okay.
Another
no, I know, but
Chuck Schumer.
I feel like Chuck Schumer looks like a goblin. Oh. They all look. Yeah, well, Nadler looks like a goblin too. Yeah, so they all look like they have this like distorted face on like all the people in Congress. And like I do, but I think what's his name? The other one that you mentioned. But the Nadler's huge.
Schumer,
though.
Nadler, and Schiff.
But Nadler's
he used to be huge.
Did he lose weight?
He lost a lot. I think from the looks of him, because his head stayed fat for a long time. So I think he got the band surgery, but he's like this big. He's tiny,
vertically challenged.
Robert Reich. I mean, so you have
Robert Reich is like 4 feet tall, right?
So you have these really reprobate political. Their religion is not the Jewish religion. Their religion is democratic politics, liberalism, and
are they all Jewish? Those guys?
Yeah.
Oh,
he didn't know.
No,
he didn't know, folks.
Oh, wow. I'm just learning about this right now.
And they're an embarrassment. They're a terrible embarrassment for us. These are really reprehensible people. And you know what's also weird? And this causes resentment on both sides. A lot of major Democrats have Jews marrying into their families.
Kamala,
Clinton,
Trump. So Ivanka is married to
that's
Kushner.
But there you go.
But he's still like in his advisor. It's not like a random distant relative.
But it's not only that. But she became Jewish. She converted to real Judaism, and he's a conservative. Like there you have at least that sort of purity of consistency. So you could understand why there would be a feeling of insecurity, not among these political leaders, because they're doing this voluntarily, but among regular people who look at this and say, who are these people who are marrying into your family? Like, why can't you? Here's something that people, you said we can say almost anything.
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't mean you, me right now. But like in the modern, there's certain things we really can't say, but you and I will anyway. And one of them is, it's a natural and healthy and spiritually, how shall I put it? Spiritually positive thing to be oriented in the direction of wanting to be with your own, people are comfortable with people who are more like them.
Race mixing isn't the norm. Like most people do not, like race mixing does happen, especially in large metropolitan areas. But like, if not left to the weird globalist, immigration policies, even in places like New York and in LA to this day, people self-segregate into their ethnic communities. It's common today.
And you'll sometimes see couples where people have made different choices, and there's all kinds of psychological reasons why that might happen, including love. Anything's possible. Who the hell am I to say? But
people like animals today too. People are crazy.
Well, okay.
I'm just saying, you said everything is like it is possible. Like people are falling in love with roller coasters.
Well, what they are is people who have emptied their souls of connection with God look for ways to to find stimulation, to find meaning, and they fill it with entertainment or with violence or with material wealth or with bizarre sexual experiences. Being a conservative means recognizing that these are not what makes a nation great or makes a people great. And America is a place where you can have many peoples. You have to be an American. I'm an American. I'm a Jew who is an American. It's not dual identity. It's not dual citizenship. And we also make a point clear. The fact that I'm entitled to become an Israeli citizen under Israeli law does not make me a dual citizen or a member, nor does it make any Jewish member of Congress a dual citizen. I'm an American citizen. I barely speak modern Hebrew. I have a lot of concern for what happens in Israel because I consider the people who live in Israel to be my extended family. That's a natural and normal and healthy thing.
Are you American first or Jewish first? Like, are you at like do you view? Because this is a distinction we'll bring up after your point. Is like, do you consider yourself ethnically Jewish but legally American? Because I disagree entirely with this foundation that there's no ethnic Americans. I do believe there are, but based on the writings of Thomas Paine and other founding fathers, but I'll only quote him directly later, that the formation of this country was directly too detached from Britain, it said, from Britannia, and to become in itself a new race. Thomas Paine said a new European race is actually his exact word.
It's a great question.
So do you, what do you feel about that? Because I think there is a distinction.
Let's put it this way.
But Shapiro disagrees with me. I know that.
And I do also, but here's why. My relationship with God is what makes me a Jew. And God is numero uno. My relationship to America, however, is not merely it's not merely a transactional one. I happen to live here now, so I'm going to be loyal. There are people who feel that way in every race. This is my country. This is my country. My mother came to this country in 1956 from Cuba, which is a country that her parents had moved to from Poland in the 1930s. All my Cuban Jewish relatives taught me to be an American patriot and to be grateful to be an American. And my dad was in the service, and we're growing up in Brooklyn. Patriotism is not all such an urban thing, it's not, we don't have the state fair and the parades, but we said the Pledge of Allegiance before class. We sang the Star Spangled Banner. We learned, unlike Kamala Harris, I know the words to my country, 'tis of thee.
Did you see she didn't know the words during the inauguration? Was that a trip? She was like, she was like looking down, and I was like, didn't she also mess up too before that? Was it the Pledge of Allegiance that she messed up? Was she like,
I wasn't watching.
No, but like before the inauguration, she also messed up. I think it was the Pledge of Allegiance, right? She was like, I pledge allegiance to the great nation or whatever, and everyone was like, what the hell? Like, and that's crazy. You're the vice president, you don't know the Pledge of Allegiance or the Star or the Star Spangled Banner or anything like that?
She was probably sloshed, so let's give her the benefit of the doubt on that.
To be honest, I feel like I'm more patriotic when I'm sloshed. Like all of a sudden, I'm just like, I'm patriotic to Germany. Even I'm not even born there.
Where do you have greater loyalty, to America or your wife? That's a bullshit question.
Yeah, I was like, those are non-exclusive. I mean,
bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. So the only time it ever becomes a relevant question is your wife wakes you up in the morning and says, I'm a communist spy. Please don't turn me in. Now you have a really hard choice to make, right?
But my wife is an Australian citizen, so it is kind of actually linked because like if you ask me my loyalty to us, because my kids are dual citizens. This is why I feel like I'm good. My kids are dual citizens, right? I'm not. But my kids are dual Australian Americans. So it's an interesting predicament. But if you were to ask me who am I loyal to, I would say the United States. And I would teach my kids they will never fight unless they live in Australia, to never fight a war on Australia's behalf. That Australia's interest, if it ever even impedes slightly on the United States, that their loyalty is not to that country. That legally they were given a document because of where they were born. But I go, but you are an American, and so to me, like my wife, her family and she obviously follows in my footsteps. We're very conservative, traditional in that way. She obviously doesn't vote. She's not an American. But like, if you were to ask me, even when I was living in Australia, it's like, I know it's funny when I talk to the foreigners that are there, they're like, would you fight for America or would you fight, for Australia? They go, well, I would leave. Because obviously that's different. Those are like temporary people. So I don't think Jewish people are in that category of modern immigrants.
Well, no, that's the incredible thing about the blessing that we have of being able to live in America is we live. So one of the greatest rabbis of the 20th century was a man named Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who lived in, he was exiled from Russia, came here in the 1930s. He lived through the mid-'80s. He was the absolute man. Everyone in the world went to him with their big questions. And he said, America is what we call a Medina Shel Chesed. That's Hebrew for a state of kindness. In other words, unlike all the other goyim, the Americans are people of kindness. We have the right to.
Who are Americans? That's what I define though, because I think that's where that's what people are getting confused. Is the Jewish friends that I have? I'll be completely honest with you. It feels like, and I mean from experience, that they care more about Israel and the United States. And here's why I say that. This is what about our first question about the connection.
Yeah.
Is that there are people that I know, and you're not one of them. So I don't want any comments giving Ron crap because he's not he's here because he's not one of these people. I don't care if you're the Jewish Jew out there, or you're me and you're the closeted Jew, and you're just trying to hide it from everyone. So you're so deep in the Jew closet that you're
like
borderline a Hitler.
Or no, LBJ.
Yeah. I gotta play on my Schaeffer name. No, but I jokes aside, right?
Yeah.
I do think that one of the things that has I think it's one of the only times I've actually felt a little bit wounded or dejected in this industry, which I rarely do feel. And I've had people say very evil things. Libel. I've gone through years of court fightings to win and to take on people who have said tremendously illegal things about me. So this is not coming from a place of sensitivity and thin skin. I've gone through a lot. Was that people who I've broken bread with, who have, I've let stay in my home, right? Who I've, kindly when they were low on their place, let them stay in a spare bed in my Airbnb or something. I've helped them out. Or I've sent them money when they were, got canceled somewhere. I've helped them get their accounts back. These are not just random people who I don't know, who I've advocated for. One of them who got kicked out of the country and I advocated to DHS and talked to a Congress member to try to get them, back from Australia. That these people have cut me off, will not work with me, have actually tried to prevent me from getting work over my views on Israel and over my views on Zionism in the country, which we're not going to get into expressly, deeply here, when we share the exact same values of America. And my idea is, why would you not then just say, well, I'm not going to pair with you up with foreign policy, but when it comes to domestic stuff, let's pair up because we care about fighting the woke. We want to fight this transgender nonsense. We want to get together and fight against censorship, but they will not associate over my views. This is not just Jewish people. These are also Protestant Zionists. It makes me wonder, well, why if I have such an influence and impact, especially with a large majority, a certain type of right-wingers, if we could weaponize them against good issues, why does that issue supersede the others? That's where I'm lost. Well, maybe you can explain.
So I think the wide perception about you, since you made the question specific to you, I want to answer the you question. But first I want to make a more general observation, which is that a lot of people are not as sophisticated in their expression of political or philosophical ideas as you and I, and especially not as I.
I know. I got to get one of those hats. Your IQ points.
You call them little hats.
Yeah, it raises your IQ,
and they match up with the big nose. In all seriousness, these people often have trouble. One of the things they teach you to do in law school, and also I majored in economics, and I think it's very good for this also, is understanding what how to make distinctions, how not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I always said that when people who are far more Zionist than I am, and again, my support for Israel is visceral based on my attachment to the people who live there. I have no stake in the particular political this, that, the other thing, or any particular tactic. Or having said that, I tend to be a little bit skeptic of people who put the flag of any country on their front porch while living in a different country. If your house is the consulate of the other country, then you put a flag out. I don't believe in marching in parades for foreign countries or wearing, that's treating countries like sports teams. Yeah, I like the Knicks, I like the Giants, I like Israel. It's okay that you're pro-Israel. You don't have to shove it down people's throat. Okay. On the problem, though, I think the way I perceived it, you crossed a line in I had an argument with a friend of ours whose name was mentioned in our very broad-ranging discussion before we came in about all our common friends, who was trying to convince me that it's murder to defend yourself if you kill civilians and children in an effort to defend yourself, you're committing murder. Now, that's not an adult point of view, because we know that in war, civilians die.
Collateral damage is in every war.
So now the question is, of course, how careful are you? Whom do you believe about what happens? And also the use of certain terminology. When you adopt the terminology, let me just make it very clear. I can't document this. I can only speak as someone who has been studying politics for 50 years. The use of the word genocide by anti-Israel advocates is an extremely purposeful and ironic tactic. The Jews, and the Zionists in particular, have made the mistake in their relentless obsession with the Holocaust. And I say this as someone whose entire family was wiped out. In other words, my grandparents came to the Western Hemisphere in the 1930s. The families they left behind were wiped out. So I'm extremely sensitive to the Holocaust. But the idea that you can keep hitting people over the head with the Holocaust in order to assert some kind of moral superiority, much less to call every example of every politician you don't like another Hitler, besides being obviously politically stupid, it cheapened the concept of the word genocide, and a very conscious decision was made by what do Marxists, keep in mind, the Palestinian activists are Marxists. These are
I agree with you on that, by the way.
Everything they're
doing, the ones that are marching, right? We're talking about, because I want to be careful when we say activists. Like, that's not everybody who's on behalf of them.
That's right. 100%.
But these large marches in the city streets is actually the people who organized BLM. It's the same people, and they're not defending Palestine because of the victimhood. It's because Israel's a colonizer, just like they were against the United States and white people for colonizing.
Bingo.
It's the same thing. And I know that, and that's what's ironic is that some of those same people have accused me of being pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian. But I think what's interesting is, well, of course I'm pro-human life, and I think what Israel's doing, especially in North Gaza, was totally indecent and not necessary in terms of the level of civilian casualties and collateral damage that could have been avoided. But we're just not a debate about the war and damage. But my point being aside is, they say, oh well, you're against this. Look, maybe I wouldn't be against the Israeli government if they were a different government. I don't know. Like I just it's like. But what I think is funny is I've been speaking out for 4 years vitriolically against Biden and the administration and against the United States government, and I use those same phrases. The United States or USA has been overreaching publicly and have been acting as a terrorist state in the Middle East. Like I say those things about my own country. I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a leftist. My family in the military, and they believe the same thing. They're like, dude, we're not fighting for anything just. Why when I'm saying, if I project those same thoughts onto Israel, because then my problem is using the word genocide. But I think that we launched in some ways I would say an ethnically irresponsible or possibly, I would say a negligible, response over that. We killed maybe over 1 million people in the Middle East during our time there. I just thought it seems so indiscriminate, the bombing, that at the very least, it seemed like an ethnic cleansing of a specific area, maybe not of an entire group, of like an indiscriminate bombing. And that's what it appeared to me. And whenever there's indiscriminate bombing at that scale and I'm paying for it, it pisses me off because I'm going, look, I know there's just bad things that happen. And it's not just like, I'm not going to well, I just don't want to pay for bad things to happen. It's like, no, I don't want bad things to happen, but bad things are happening. There's massacres of Christians going on in the Congo. There's bad things happening around the world. I think that's what I'm saying too. My problem is that with people, I'm like, I don't care if you're a Jew. I don't care if I don't care. Like, I mean, I employ Jews. I know Jews, and I myself am apparently made 2 more of them with my 2 young sons. I don't know if you saw, but Black Twitter now doesn't hate me because I'm racist. They hate me because they found out I'm a Jew. So it's not a joke. They found that my mother's name was like Arian Schoenberg. I don't know where they got these,
what do
these
you
things.
know?
Yeah, Schoenberg.
We'll invite you to the next bris.
But I thought it's funny because, it's like now they hate me for a whole nother reason. But so it's like, I'm at the tail end of anti-Semitism myself, but I'm like, why is it that Avi Yemeni wouldn't shake my hand because he said the way that I think about Israel and stuff, his community would cut him off if he even got seen shaking hands. And I go, you haven't, other than me, I'm like the only other conservative that was there in Australia who's got conservative ties that cares about the Australian government and the things you care about. Why would you alienate an ally over our opinion of a country on the god shit other side of the world? That's not even, Australia's on the opposite hemisphere, and you're going to somehow create a division between us over that? We can disagree about that. Come on the show, let's talk about that. But right now, at that moment, we were fighting for the constitution of that country, about rechanging the constitution. Why would we divide now over this? I don't get it. I think a lot of us don't get it because I don't get it, man. It's confusing.
And 55 minutes into it, we can only touch on these issues, but we can't, part of the answer, a guy like Avi, who also wears his Jewish identity on his sleeve, we feel that, you see, it's one thing to be anti, to look back at the Iraq war and say, that was a turkey shoot, that was ridiculous, we were, all the things. It's another thing to allow one's comments about the Iraq war be used in part of a discussion where people say, well, we know who was really interested in that. Why did we go to war in Iraq? Because the Jews, because Israel wanted us to knock out Saddam Hussein for them. There isn't really any. It's not a reason. It's not really. It's something. It's an unprovable conspiratorial assertion that may or may not be true. The fact is,
well, Netanyahu's speech, I think, kind of where he's talking about like the 6 countries that the U.S. needed to take seriously. I think people realize, where people realize that they're our ally and that these don't hold massive strategic position for the United States. I agree with you that some of this stuff is inferred, but I don't think. You don't have to be hyper intelligent to realize that the official narrative on 9/11 isn't true. Whether or not the exact reality of whether it was Israel or Saudi Arabia, that could be inferred, right?
Well, it was Saudi Arabia because even it's not part of the official narrative. The facts back it up. There's no narrative of Israel doing 9/11. I mean, that's in the category of a blood libel. There's dancing Israelis is a bullshit basis. I mean, as far as I know, it's been debunked. They could have had a square dance. Hey, that wouldn't prove anything about that. These guys were all freaking Saudi Arabians. Saudi Arabia was an absolutely out of control situation until after 9/11, when the royal family there said, we've got to start having a coherent foreign policy, and just because every one of you guys has $1 billion doesn't mean you can conduct your own foreign policy, because we're going to destroy the entire world. And things have changed a lot in Saudi Arabia.
I know we threatened to invade them at one point too. So I know that there was
To invade
Saudi Arabia, because I know it was like, hey, I know I'm not joking. You guys can look this up. The United States was like, if you don't get this under control, basically, and then we're also going to place air bases all around your country. So whether you like it or not, I mean, you have billions of dollars, but if you don't have American air superiority, you're kind of screwed. All the money in the world's not going to buy you the military until it does, because now they bought our military equipment. So
bottom line is Jews. Let's go back. Let me see if I can bring it all together. Which answer I can't. It's too much going on. But Jews do have a feeling of vulnerability. And we believe that our friends, it's one thing to say, as I said, criticize American policy in Iraq using the most severe language you want to, but that's because you're saying, I, as an American, am ashamed of what my country did. I think it was a mistake for reasons X, Y, and Z. But when you say, I, as an American, condemn what another country did, then we start to wonder, why are you so interested in this country? Because, like you said, it's not a matter of it's not a matter of how much foreign aid goes there, because you're not going to take this tack of, well, I'm paying for it. You're saying, no, I hate for bad things to happen. But you don't hate for bad things to happen when they're happening in Somalia. And you don't hate for when bad things, like...
To be honest, I don't really care about Africa.
Why?
That's probably something I won't state.
Oh, no,
here.
but it is, because I already said it. You're more interested in people who are more like you.
I'm more interested in conflicts that are directly involved in our geopolitical dominance, which is right now, we've been involved in the Middle East since I've basically been alive. I was born in 93. And, talking about, I'm born right into around the Gulf War era. And then you move down, and then we have a couple years of peace. But since I've been a sentient, a human being, we've been in war there. So it's always fascinated me on what's going on in the Middle East, because I was taught to hate Muslims and taught to that Muslims hated us. But I was never asked, why do they hate us? And it's like, oh, well, because obviously we're invading their homelands, and we're strategically, down the road causing, the Arab Spring, the uprisings, a lot of things are going on. But then who's we? What interest is that as an American? I'm always like, what does that benefit an American? And I think a lot of us were trying to figure that out. Okay, oil's one thing, I get that, but we've got a lot of oil here, and we're so against fracking it and pulling it out of the ocean. There's all these weird things. So it's like, okay, is it oil? I mean, opium? I mean, that is one thing, but then we can get cheap opium, sent over from China. I mean, we're dying at 100,000 a year from that anyways, the cheap opium. So I've been trying to wonder, it's like, well, I guess they say, strategic. Well, we're able to put our bases in Saudi Arabia. And I look at Iraq, and it's like, Iraq was a good proxy for Iran. Why would we want Iraq to collapse under a secular, counterinsurgent government that was against the main Muslim sect that countered it? It was a good balance of power. I'm going, it has to be, because there's some other country that's interested in this. And is it the EU? Is it Israel? What's going on?
You just took a huge leap. It has to be because of some other country. It could have been for any number of geopolitical or geostrategic interests. Saddam Hussein was absolutely a destabilizing influence. I mean, remember the first Gulf War was his invasion of Kuwait. That wasn't an Israel thing. There's no plausible reason that was an Israel thing.
No, I've never heard anything suggested that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, once we stuck our pecker in that hornet's nest, okay, it wasn't going to just come out and be the same old one, because then there was this prestige issue of Saddam poking GWB, in the eye, because he wasn't going to live up precisely to the terms. It is entirely, it's like the distinction between causation and correlation. Could it be beneficial to Israel, perhaps in the short term, for Saddam Hussein to be out of the picture? To tell you the truth, he was not a meaningful strategic threat to Israel. They no Arab national army was of any concern to the Israelis after 1973. Period. It wasn't about him. America has its own interests, and they may they can coincide with those of Israel at a given time. All I want to say is there's extra sensitivity, and there's certain terminology that makes, again, I think that the use of the Holocaust as a moral sword, not only a shield, by certain elements in our community, in the Jewish community, has been a grave mistake. As well as the constant reiteration of the Holocaust experience, this idea that it's so hilarious to me when people respond to, some Groyper comment about the Holocaust, saying, this goes to show why they need more Holocaust education. No, you schmuck. You have it exactly backwards. It's time to stop the Holocaust education. That doesn't mean it should be removed from the curricula. It's history. It should be taught as history. But when you have set yourselves up as the victim of the 20th century, the one everybody gets to kill, the one who's always tugging on people's, moral heartstrings, that's not a way to get people to respect you. You're now known as a victim. You're now known as losers, and you're now known as people who are demanding some kind of moral payback. It's not a good look. It's over.
It's like the slavery thing with Black Americans, where you get it. It happened. You start to get tired of it. You're like, okay, but now what? You know what I mean? It's like also, I always ask people, how many Americans died in the World War II? Do you know? How many Indians died? Do you know? How many Japanese died in the war? Do you know? But how many Jews died in the Holocaust? 6 million. So people do know one and not the other, which then I feel like, it does make you want, like you said, a lot of those things. I do think that harping on this is causing resentment. And I don't think, like, millennials, we like edgy stuff. From the way that things moved at 36 points towards Trump in the last election, I've noticed talking to young Gen Z don't need a podcast to tell them, like, hey, don't be soy. Like, I meet a young Gen Z guy and he's just buff and he's like, I don't even eat soy sauce because it makes you gay. And it's like, this is obviously not, true. But look, he's like, they're growing up, like half the kids in their high school are, gender confused. They're like, I'm not even touching that Asian shit. Like, they're just going by observation. And so they're sort of like making their opinions, not from what they're listening to, but what they're seeing, which is different than us. We sort of grew up in at least my generation grew up in a more normal world. And then it turned in our late teens into something a little more weird into our adult life. We watched the shift. They grew up in the shift. And so their world is a little bit different. And I feel like we have to look to them to where they're saying, look, we don't want any of this historical stuff. We want to get back to we want white nations to be white. We want this to be this. And I don't know if this is going to, I don't know if we're going to find a good ground here. We want it
to be okay. Going back to what I said before, to be naturally attracted to and want to hang out with people who are more like us. That is a highly adaptive inclination. Mm-hmm. That's how you survive. If you don't want to believe in God, and if you want to say that we're the product of a gazillion years of amazing coincidences, fine, and let's go with evolution. People, tribes of every kind and throughout history, of every different color, have historically been hostile to other tribes, merely because they're different. They may also infringe on resources. There could be all kinds of reasons to compete. Now, that doesn't mean that we should act like savages in a world of abundance. But don't tell me, there was a guy who wanted to go out with my wife, which is reasonable. She's really pretty. This was in college. He was what we now call an African American. In those days, he would have been known as a black. And she wasn't interested. Not because he was a black, she just wasn't interested. But even then, this is in the 1980s, he says to her, so I heard you're a racist because you don't want to go out with me. No, man, I just don't want to go out with you. I'm just not interested in that.
Attraction's subjective.
It's entirely subjective.
Yeah.
There's a reaction that is absolutely taking place. And that's what you're describing. It's a reaction. It's a pushback. We were told that we can't think this, we were told that we can't say that, and teenagers, and especially people who have the ability to express themselves anonymously, are going to take every opportunity to say shocking things. And sometimes I've been guilty of getting overheated over some Groyper type comment on X, and someone will remind me, Ron, it's just some teenager, man. The guy's not a threat to you in any way. Everyone needs to chill. And that's why you and I can have this conversation, because we get that. We realize that there are important conversations to have, and these issues are okay to explore. I mean, we need to be realistic about them. We see what happened in Los Angeles when they decided that they were going to stop getting things done and just focus on feeling good about themselves by forcing the round pegs into square holes. We're going to have overweight women be firefighters because that's going to make us feel good about ourselves.
That is a good example where it's like they've completely abandoned reason and thought. And I think that's why, because we're in the golden era, we're going into the golden age of the Trump admin. And I mean, that's what they're saying, right? And I think that these conversations are important, Ron, because what I think is like, I understand one thing that I feel like a lot of people who hold my similar worldview on the right do not understand. And it's one of the reasons why I've always been able to work in the mainstream right-wing media sphere. And it's one of the main reasons why people in the mainstream wish I wasn't in it, and they would wish me to be gone, and have tried hard to make that happen multiple times. But I think that the main thing is that I understand the left and the right. And what I mean by the right is that I know that Trump is not a neo-Nazi, right-wing white nationalist. That's not who he is. And they go, so he's a liberal. I go, well, he was a liberal. In fact, some might say he is still liberal, but if we want to use more modern terms to define things, like how we wouldn't say gay means happy anymore, we would say he is a center-right. He is a center-right individual leaning towards the center. His ultimate goal, people are saying, oh, well, he's, I thought he was the Fourth Reich. And now he's just accepting anyone who accepts him. Like, yeah, he's trying to become a magnet towards the center. And then in his inauguration speech, he said the same thing, that, oh, we're going to be of common sense and of colorblindness. And, a lot of people, in my circles, people who would be considered more extreme in some ways, like, what the heck? That's not what I expected. I go, what? Were you not paying attention? Like, but then to me, I'm not upset about it, because they go, you'll have people come out that are my friends that I'm not going to mention all their names here for whatever, but are like, oh, everything sucks. All these directives suck. And I go, you think you got elected? You didn't get elected. like I know if you got elected, oh, the doors would be blown open today, and people would be getting physically tossed over the wall. Would I support that? I'm not going to comment, but my point is that we elected a guy who's coming back to the center. And with that, I want to go with the momentum right now and say, if this is what can heal some of this insanity, is coming back to a point of reason, then let's come here. Elijah, and then let's talk once we get together and can finally talk again.
What Trump is politically is a regular guy. He is the regular guy that my dad and your dad were. My dad, in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, and your dad in the 90s when you were growing up. Regular people who thought regular things like, if you have a border, that means two countries are separated, and you should have to ask permission to go from one to the other. Things like, if you commit a crime, you should have to go to prison if it's a violent crime, and it should have no bearing on whether you go to prison or not, what color you are. Things like, prosecutors should not decide whether or not a crime has taken place. Things like...
Yeah, like nonsensical things like if you cut off your penis, you're now a woman. It's like,
this is just regularness.
Yeah.
And it's considered to be reactionary. And, we used to say in the Bush days, JFK would be considered a right-wing nut today, his level of politics. Trump is just, what he has is the strength. And I just tweeted this morning when I just took in was it last night? It's a blur. Took in all the amazing things that happened in the last 24 hours. This is a much greater person than I realized. He is, because he's not ideologically driven. He's driven by genuine love for returning this country to a normal path where normal families of every race, creed, and color can get along, and where where these millennials do not have to feel a need to push back and be groypers and follow, Nick in order to the whole thing. Like, I remember when Gavin McInnes started the Proud Boys, I said, this is going to hang him. They are absolutely going to turn this into a Hitler Youth thing the first opportunity they get. That's exactly what happened. But that is what Gavin was trying to do. Let's find a place. You know what? We need to make it okay to be a young guy in this country looking for honest work, wanting to hang around with his friends, wanting to be treated fairly, get rid of this college scam, too many people going to college for too much money for no damn reason, learning nothing. Regularness.
Yeah, and I think that's what, this is where I want to end on this, is I think with like the place where we talked about at the beginning, the place of whether it's Zionism or these people that are against it, I want to say my opinion is there's currently a place for all of them, whether you like it or not, on either side. And I think that Trump's going to allow that. And that's why the people that want the side that is more, closer to Nick or whatever, they want to make Trump seem like he's Hitler because he allows them in to speak and to be around, maybe even some policy advisors to kind of be more of that nationalist idea. In the same way, people are going to lynch him for letting Harmeet Dillon say a demon prayer at the RNC, And I love Harmeet to death, but I was like, oh Lord, I knew this was, I was there. I was like, oh, she's going to get so much SHIT for this. I was like, this is not going to go well. But like, do you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like this, we have to accept in the way that it's just like, it's always tell guys this, look, if you want your wife to be a man, if you want to be more like a man, then go be gay, but wait until you find out, you probably find gays are more insufferable than women. So maybe like, guys are always like, my wife's not like this. It's like, you mean she's not like you. She's not like a man. Like, until you accept the fact that a woman's a woman, and with that comes the beautiful things you like. It comes the sex, the experience, the pleasure, the tenderness, the love, but you're going to get some crazy shit too. You're going to get a period, you're going to have hormones. You're going to get the motherly gene that's going to come out, and the nurturer can also be protective and controlling, right? So you're going to get the good with the bad, and it's not all means it's wrong. It just means you got to figure it out because it's not like you. It's different. And I think America's in a turning age. And it's not that I'm telling everyone accept everything. Everything goes. We're at an age where we have not been able to discuss anything. Discussions have been shut down. And the point is that, you know what? Maybe it's time we start having these discussions. Maybe we stop firing people, kicking people out, and making people be closeted about their ideas left and right. People being closeted about their Israeli ideas in right-wing media. People in corporate America being closeted about their right-wing ideas. Like, a lot of these companies are toxic towards Israel too. They hate them, right? So like, we don't want people being afraid in the workplace or in this to be honest. We want people to have an honest discussion. And what I'd love to see is if people are going to depart, let it be amicable, mutual. It's like, all right, our ideas don't align. Maybe I shouldn't work here. Maybe you shouldn't work here. Let's go. But the animosity I want to end. And I hope the next 4 years, the golden era, is the conversations begin again and we can get back to figuring out who we are and what to do. Because right now we're just fighting. We're just calling each other names. And that's what, like X, as I was saying, Rumble, my last point is, that's what the benefit of free speech is, that also it's caused us to, in some ways, cater to our very starved echo chambers that have been like, oh, we've been under this like centrist, liberal agenda for so long. We can finally cater to what we really think. And what that's done is sometimes we're just calling each other slurs or blocking each other. And it's like, you know what? Block someone for a good reason. If they're causing illegal, harassment, like you said, we talked about earlier, if they're bringing down the quality of your conversation because they're just posting the N-word 50 times, I need it 80 times. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like 50 times, it's like, I don't need that in the discourse. But if someone just disagrees with you, if they have a derision, if they don't like your ideology and they're coming at you with an educated perspective, you can engage or not engage, but maybe don't block them, maybe don't cut them down. Let's not do what happened to Nick Fuentes again, where you try to make him disappear, because it looks like that one backfired. At least that situation backfired. And so I'm hoping that we can get out of that. We can get back into a place. I'll give you your final thought on what you think as well, because I've really enjoyed my time with you, and I thought you're fantastic. If people want to watch in the past as well, if you enjoyed Ron, we also did an episode of another show together and stuff. So look up Ron. He's got a lot of stuff going on in his life. You can find more work from him. Particularly, I'll give him a chance to plug it. But I'll give you the final word, and then also please tell people how they can find you, how they can follow you, how they can support you.
I appreciate it. I'm really. People should know that the reason I'm here is because I made a joke about a joke that you made, and you picked up that I got your joke, and that I was riffing on your joke, and it was a Jewish joke. It was a Jewish joke. Elijah and I had been mutual followers for a long time. And it was odd that we were not really communicating anymore. And we started DMing each other and saying, we should talk about this because we can. Not everyone can. Nick Fuentes and I follow each other. I don't have much to say to him, but we can follow each other because I'm not saying I have to, but we can. We need more of it. We need more of it, and people need to calm down, lower the temperature, depoliticize things that, look, we're in the politics business. We're in the politics business. But does Pepsi have to be in the politics business? Does Jaguar have to be in the politics business? It don't work. It doesn't work. The world needs to get back to business. In his inaugural speech, President Trump made a point of saying government has to get out of trying to re-engineer society. And Ron Coleman, you can find me mostly on X, at Ron Coleman, spelled with an E, RONCOLEMAN. I have a little tiny YouTube channel and a podcast called Culmination, spelled like my name with the word nation. And thanks for the opportunity.
I really appreciate it, guys. And if you want to support this show, make sure you support Ron, because that's going to be the most important aspect to all of this, is supporting him and follow him. Because I think that's the whole point of what I want everyone to deduce from this, is that, look, everyone knows that I, sort of started the political realm as a centrist. And no, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to a point, because when I was a centrist, I just didn't know a lot of things. And so I just didn't know. So I just took, I'll listen to both sides and we'll see what's going out, and there are centrist shows like Benny Johnson's show, right? Even Tim Pool's probably a lot less vocal on his own show than he probably thinks in his own mind. I would imagine. I think so. He typically will let the guests fight out the beef. Sometimes he'll take a hard stance, but more now than he used to. But I do think that it is important that we do have conversations. That's kind of why we started the show almost serious, because it's like, you know what? Let's start a new show that's back to having conversations. And I think it's going to get really popular over time, because I think what people are looking for is this: not a ton of remote conversations, in person, looking people in the eyes, having a talk, and being able to conversate without having to fight and win and lose, but just learn from each other or air their grievances and move on. So I need to hear back from you guys in the comments if you've enjoyed this. We've gone through a few episodes already. These shows obviously are pre-recorded. They are post-produced. They are edited for particularly for YouTube guidelines and standards. This is a YouTube show. Produced primarily on YouTube. And of course, we appreciate you guys supporting directly. But don't forget as well, if you want to find out how you can support the show, since we are not monetized, pick up a wellness kit today at twc.health/almostserious, promo code SERIOUS for 10% off. The link's right there on the screen. Oh, that way. I got to get used to the studio. The studio's not even completed, but it's like, the woodwork isn't even completed, but we're working on it. It's getting together. And you know what? I am independent. Like, just so you guys know, everything in these studios, I've paid out of pocket. This is like out of my wallet. We don't have big financial backers. I don't know how we do all this by being demonetized everywhere. I'm demonetized on X. Do you know that? And that's from sharing a news story. It's not even from anything like, I was one of the first people demonetized for sharing a breaking news story. The federal government asked them to block a bunch of people. And then once they got restored, they took away all my subscribers and my monetization, and I never got it back. I never heard back from a human. I'm one of the rare people. I'm not one of these guys that was against Israel and got demonetized. I just got it for whatever. But
but that's because God wanted you to learn a lesson.
God wanted me to learn a lesson.
Don't ever criticize the federal government.
yeah. The federal government does not take criticism well. But shout out to my guests. Thank you so much, Ron, for coming on. I really appreciate it. You don't have to get up. I had to move forward because I'm tall. So I feel like this is like a big set.
What am I? Adler?
Yeah, kind of. kind of. I barely fit. Look at this. I look like, people don't realize I'm actually a decently tall gentleman. Yeah.
He's a decently tall gentleman.
Yeah, so it's like, I gotta actually get up. But have a great rest of the week, guys, as always.
He's a big guy.
I'm a big guy from the prairies, right? Just a humble big guy from the prairies. Have a great rest of the week, guys. We'll see you next time, every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And may God bless the United States of America.
Amen.
I'm signing out.